154, welcome to the Thunderdome. I don't know why this is the Thunderdome, but welcome to our latest episode. As you can see, despite it being 2021, we're still dealing with the repercussions of COVID, and so not only have we social distanced, but ourselves and the crew, until we're starting filming this, have been wearing masks, so I think we can remove them for now so that you can understand what the heck we're saying.
Can you?
Yeah. If you're unfamiliar with how the Not So Round Table works, it's a show where George and I answer your airsoft-related questions, the best of our abilities, as pulled from our matching helms of reasoning. Matching in terms of color, not in terms of style. But we've collected your questions from the previous episode, 153. If you have an airsoft-related question, please put those in the comments section below. We read through every comment and question, and we collect the questions and put them into the helms of reasoning. If we don't make your question, worry not, we will get to it eventually, but we need you to post it in this video. So if you asked a question last video and we don't get to it this time, post it again. We'll collect them for the next episode.
Yeah, so any unanswered questions do get pulled from the helmets. So.
Yeah. We'll do our best to pull all the questions. One, because we don't want to miss your question, and two, because it keeps things fresh. And that way we don't have to go back 7 years to find new questions. Right, George?
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, for a while there we were pulling from 10-year-old
I mean, we found
videos.
some good ones, but man, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's also funny too to go back to the old questions and kind of like read the context in which they were written at the time, like what products existed then, or you know, the style of players then. But without further ado, let's get right into the questions.
Oh.
George, would you like to start us off? I looked at you like you knew. Sorry,
I was looking away. So this is from the Gray Wolf of Airsoft. Love my Tavora, especially for CQB, but my question is, why are ball pubs not so common on the field? I would think that compact size would give you more of an advantage. That's a good question, and it's probably pretty easy to answer. So I'll answer my thoughts. Is probably just most people think they're ugly. The AR, the ergonomics of the AR is almost, what are we at right now? 60 years old?
Yeah, well, they're standardized,
from the basic,
right?
From the first Armalite. So it's like, it's kind of hard to beat, but he's got a good point. And with that longer inner barrel, you can make a really compact rifle shoot really, really far.
That's true.
Like an AUG accuracy is really good if you type bore it.
That's true.
And it's a version 3 gearbox.
I will say, of all the bullpups that I think we've ever used in airsoft, the best reloading system has been the Tavor. Just like in terms of like being able to release the mag efficiently. And not only the looks department, but I would argue, much like you said, the ergonomics are so different from what's standard. A lot of people don't want to take the time to have to relearn how to use the battle rifle just to use something unique. Couple that with, you know, the difficulty of reloading, which is funny because the whole point of the bullpup is supposed to be easier to reload, but I have not found that to be true.
No,
yeah,
I haven't. But I mean, maybe, like I said, I think it's kind of a little bit due to looks,
right?
And then maybe just due to popularity. It's like not the in thing, I guess.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's look at the first bullpup ever for airsoft, Famas.
Yeah.
Garbage fire.
I mean, the
it was
only
the first
reason
one. It was
the
just
only reason that the Japanese made the Famas as their first was because of Metal Gear Solid. It was around the same time when the original Metal Gear Solid came out. That was why it was the or the HK SOCOM, and that those were the guns that people built first for Tokyo Marui. Like, well, some of the first. You know? Don't quote me. I don't know that much about airsoft history, so don't roast me. But
so we had the Famas, right?
Yeah.
And the Famas, compared to subsequent versions of AEGs, used a unique magazine when compared to like an M4.
Yeah.
And so that kind of required specialized mags. And then the next bullpup to kind of come out, I'm guessing, was the AUG, which also used unique magazines.
Yeah.
And then you could argue that the P90 is a bullpup, sort of. Uses unique magazines, and none of those are really conducive to kind of filling out an existing arsenal when you already have, let's say, an M4 or something that takes an M4 style magazine. Now all of a sudden you've got to buy new magazines, and so I think maybe that's why they're not so popular. That's discounting, of course, the huge advantage you mentioned about length versus barrel length.
Yeah.
Like you can clear doorways in rooms with a bullpup and still have the range to be more than effective outdoors, especially like you said with the AUG, where you've got the ability to just tight bore it and you've got range for days.
A compact AUG basically, I think, can have like the same inner barrel as an AK-47, which is a great inner barrel length at like 450 millimeter, 450 millimeter range. I mean, maybe I think another thing that might hinder it is, because you mentioned about the magazines being kind of proprietary, is because all of the magazine development for mid-caps has all been on M4s and maybe some AK mags. Maybe like using a old school style mid-cap for an AUG is like probably, I don't know off the top of my head, but probably not as much as an M4.
That's true. Okay, so we've got the F2000 though. So the F2000 comes out and they're like, look, we've got M4 mags.
Yeah.
On this hideous gun. It's not hideous. I'm sorry. If you like F2000s, they're great. But
I mean, like the only bullpup I think right now could maybe, like the Tavor is pretty good looking. Yeah. The new Keltec RDB looks pretty cool, but I haven't used it yet, so I don't know the ergonomics.
I think
the AUG to me was always pretty cool. It's just, I don't know, I just never wanted to build one, but maybe I should, I don't know.
I think based on the initial kind of exposure I had to the RDB and, you know, we're just kind of fooling around with it, I will say that it's probably one of the cooler bullpup platforms currently available, or that will be available at the time of this filming. And because it uses AK mags, I think it has the ability to use AK, right, mags? Mason? Do I know what I'm talking about?
No,
Do I not know
I guess we don't.
Unique magazines? Guess not. Anyway, it looks cool. Whatever. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Next question? Okay, thanks.
That's a good question.
What? The RDB uses M4. I knew that.
I was actually about to say it.
No, sorry. Yeah, it uses M4 mags. I'm an idiot.
I mean, you could build those AK bullpups like from GHK kits.
Oh yeah, or they made the didn't they make like a SCAR bullpup conversion?
Yeah.
It looks pretty gross. All right, this one's from, I'm not going to say your name because it's not appropriate. Of course I'd pull this one. This one's from CMS. If you know, you know. Question is, why is there such a drastic difference between airsoft gameplay in America and Europe? This is going to be difficult because neither of us have really played in Europe, but based on what we've seen, I guess.
We didn't play in Japan, but we did witness what play is like in Japan.
Outside of America,
of the U.S.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
You know, that's a tough one, to be honest with you. I would like to say that like Europe is free of drama when it comes to like video games as well, but that's probably not true. So I think maybe, that's a really good question. Maybe it's just our conflicting personalities mash more. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe.
So I think, okay, so I've thought about this before, and not because I read the question, but I've thought about this before because I was interested in going to like Burger It. And I think to me, it boils down to two things. It boils down to budget and availability, right? Europe has traditionally had much higher importation costs to get airsoft in country, right? So that means players need to spend a lot more money to get into the game, and higher cost, I think, narrows the player base to those who really want to do it, right? It's not so cheap that it's a throwaway hobby that's like, I'll do it some weekends and not others. You got to be devoted if you want to be into airsoft, right? And devoted airsoft players generally play harder, play more fairly. I would say compared to kind of like the feeling you get when you play here. And I think that the second reason is access to locations. Because so much of the Europe that plays airsoft was involved in World War II, there are a lot of old air bases and battlefields and things that like can be used for airsoft play. So immersion, a million, right? Yeah. And then access to those fields really gets you into the game in the way that maybe a plywood indoor field doesn't. With that said, we're seeing a lot more indoor CQB style play, like speed QB type stuff in like France and other countries where that's gaining in popularity. And I think that's probably because of American influence and social media. But I would argue that those are maybe the two main drivers to like the difference is because, you know, America has such easier access to airsoft guns being cheaper. You get a lot younger players and a lot maybe less diehard players playing because they can afford to. and because you can go down to your local, warehouse in your field if you have one and play on a weekend. You don't have to devote as much time to being into the game, and so that I think generates. Plus, we're hip hop American culture and being cool. I think it goes a long way to.
I think a lot of the answers you say are very good. I think we can agree on this. Since we have traveled around the U.S. for the most part, I do think that there are different states, like West Coast versus East Coast versus Midwest, South, Texas. All of these players have way different personalities in the way they act.
Yeah. And different play styles.
Like players in Texas will act way different than people in New York or even California, or from what my experience is.
Who would you say? I'll
roast people. I don't care.
Okay, so what state have we been to that had the most honest players?
New York.
I was going to say, Bad Blood seemed to be...
Always New York.
Yeah.
But, I have a reason why Bad Blood... The thing is, the only place I played in New York was for Bad Blood.
Yeah.
And the reason is because it's full auto. Like, realistically, that's why there really isn't much issue in regards to hitting people, because it's full auto, and not only that, it's a huge game, so it's just BB Fest.
That's true.
So I think that's one reason. But also, you don't see a lot of... I didn't really see a lot of egos clash in those kind of games.
Yeah.
Too much.
Yeah. No, totally.
Probably the
agreed.
most honest, for sure. Least honest? I don't want to... least honest, probably California. So, least honest, I'd say California.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest. Not so much in CQB, but outdoors. Probably.
Yeah.
I just based that off of just all the cheater videos where they always filmed that,
Yeah. Well, it's usually California or Florida.
It's usually California.
Or what's that? I forgot what that was. It Georgia or Florida? They've got that indoor game where there's a whole bunch of videos with people ripping on players. I think it's Florida. I don't know. Whatever. It's California. We suck. Bunch of hit shruggers. You want to ask another question?
What's actually funny is maybe one episode we could literally just roast each region, because I have some stories that are just good about each region. I just don't want to get into it right now. But that was a good question.
We all know the most honest airsoft players are from Canada.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know. Or at least the most apologetic.
Robo's like, yeah. Combatif, or Combat FF. How old is too old to start airsofting? Probably never.
I was going to say, I don't think any age is too old. Well, I would say it's probably too old if you go out and injure yourself while playing without doing any crazy kung fu moves. But if you're going out and injuring yourself, you might want to either take it easy, provide cover fire and not try to go ham sandwich. But I don't think there really is too old to start. I think there's a too young.
Yeah, I think there's a too young. I think the one thing that would maybe benefit younger airsofters is to have younger airsoft nights. Right. And I think that can only be to CQB arenas.
Right.
And I think it should all be one jewel with two O's.
Yeah.
So it's just really lax, that was one thing about Japan I noticed. A lot younger audience in some places, and it's probably not an issue because it's one jewel.
A lot more women too, which was cool. Yeah.
I think the one jewel thing could probably solve that issue. But I think having age brackets, if Airsoft ever gets big enough in the U.S., can really help. Nothing wrong with playing with your kid, for sure, but within reason.
Yeah. Obviously there are exceptions to the rule. Yeah. Like I might say, as a general rule of thumb, 12's kind of young. 11, 12's kind of young to be starting to play airsoft, but there are exceptions to the rule. That's not saying I'm saying if you're younger than 12, you shouldn't play airsoft. I'm just saying for most arenas, that's kind of young. And if we had brackets where you could have, youngins nights, it sounds terrible. If you had young, I'm sorry. Ryan looked at me like, what are you doing?
A good example would be the
junior nights? That's good.
Remember Tac City?
That's way better than youngins nights.
Remember Tac City Boot Camp? That was a good concept. It was only for, it was during the summer, it was during the day, it was like a summer camp, and it was just for kids to play airsoft,
And there's less pressure. Well, dude, even when we did airsoft camp, we had a younger player base make up the majority of the people who came up. Yeah. I think they had a lot more fun because it was slower paced. Yeah. It wasn't as intense. You didn't have a bunch of 30-year-old dudes yelling to move up. Well, other than us.
I mean, here's another thing, and this is probably like go into like the pet peeve region of when you're playing airsoft, and I know that there's some adults who want to take it super seriously. When you get around kids playing at your local arena, just chill. Like, just literally just chill, and just, you know what? Like, it's not your super hardcore milsim game, and if that's what you want, then go to those events and act like that.
Yeah.
Don't even act like that at those events, honestly. But if you're gonna act like that, at least do it there versus like to the younger generation, because like all you may do at that point is turn them off from the sport, and that's the future of the sport.
Or even worse, you're teaching them that that's the way
you're teaching them
you
bad
play
habits.
Airsoft, right? And then they're just going to get older, and then continue that negative super alpha play style, and that's, I don't know. I don't think I don't think Airsoft requires violence of action.
No. I mean, that's you know.
I mean, it does, but it doesn't.
Tell that to the zipper factory.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Although, I mean, in many ways, I think you and I are both glad that it's not that way anymore, right?
Yeah. No. I think even the people who, you know, played back then, I never played at Zipper, but my friends who did, they probably also don't. They like to reminisce about the stories, but I don't think they'd want it to go back.
I want to go back and do it.
Yeah.
God. I remember going home from games just bleeding.
Yeah.
Like literally bleeding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good. All right. Next question is from Hannah, which is a, what do you call those words, Ryan, that are spelled the same backwards and forwards? Onomatopoeia? No, that's not it. No, it's a race car Hannah.
I don't know. I know what you're talking about.
Lol. I don't know. Yeah, okay. Anyway, whatever. Hannah, excellent question. Hey, y'all.
Hey, y'all.
I've recently got into watching airsoft videos such as Jet, Leah, Dayton, and Dayton, and I was wondering why it seemed like there are not a large number of females in airsoft or the firearms industry in general. There are women in the real gun industry and airsoft. Unfortunately, there's a very fine line between being a female that plays airsoft and being a gun bunny. And I don't think there needs to be a whole lot of place for gun bunnies just to sell products.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think, you know, it's also like, I mean, I know this sounds cliche, and I'm not saying that one side is exclusive. You know, this is exclusive to, you know, to male airsofters or what have. It's not. It's a sport for everybody. You know, it really doesn't matter to me. It's an equal opportunity to play whoever you are. That said, though, it's just, you know, certain things, certain hobbies appeal to certain demographics. It's just facts. You know, like I'm probably not going to be interested in clothing shopping as much as like my wife would be, for example.
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to be in, you know, at the same time, like your girlfriend might not be interested in like woodworking, for example.
Yeah.
You know, there are just hobbies that are just generally skew one way or another. We, you know, definitely welcome anybody who wants to try. You know, I know some female shooters who are really good shooters in the firearm industry who really care about firearms. They really enjoy firearms. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just not for everybody. Just most, you know, some people just aren't going to get into it. That's all.
I think one of the biggest driving factors for bringing new players into the game these days has a lot to do with social media and content that's consumed online. And we get a lot of players who are like, oh, you know, I stumbled on this YouTube video where I watched this dude snipe a whole bunch of people, or I saw this, that, and the other thing. And I think that there just isn't a lot of support in the industry for female airsofters that want to do their own content. I mean, we see a lot of sponsorships across the industry for male players, and there's not a whole lot of support for women players outside of, you know, Leah and players like her in the U.S. I think you see a lot more European female airsofters that have quite a big following.
Yeah.
You know, Femme Fatale is a big one in the UK, but there's quite a few in Europe compared to the U.S. And I think if you saw more industry-wide support for female airsofters, like for gameplay and like celebrating them playing airsoft as just an airsoft player, as opposed to like, hey, look at this gun she's holding in like tighter than necessary camos, you know, or like, I don't know. I think it really has to do more with like how female airsofters are promoted versus, you know, showing them just like every other airsoft player. And I think that goes a long way to turn off potential female players, because they see that and they're like, I'm not really, you know, that's not how I look, or that's not what I'm into, or that's, you know, not the style of play that I want to get into.
I agree with that, but I actually disagree. And what I was saying is like, I would think that would be motivation for somebody who doesn't want that to actually do the opposite.
Sure.
That's what I would think, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly would think that would be like, oh, well, I don't want Airsoft to be like this, representing women this way. I want it to be, and that's what the hunting industry did, to be honest with you. I mean, like, if you look at the hunting industry, they were that direction in probably like the 70s and 80s a little bit, and then they just started going more of like, no, just treat them just the same. And it's helped the hunting industry at least gain a lot more females into that hobby.
Yeah, I'd love to see more girls play Airsoft.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I think it would be great. Diablo the Pyro asks, with the growing popularity in Call of Duty Warzone, I figure I'd ask, how do you think a 100-player Battle Royale style game would work in Airsoft? Love the content. I've always been watching the Evike videos since early 2011. Stay safe and keep up the great work. Well, thank you for your dedication. That is a long time. That is as long as I've been at this company.
I was going to say, dude, that was almost as long as we've been here.
Well, I started in 2011. You started in 2010. Anyway, Warzone.
I don't know what that is.
It's just a battle royale Call of Duty series. I mean, battle royale I think is popular in video games because it can appeal pretty well in games. Like with Airsoft, it's so different. For number one, games types where you pick up items. The only way to do 100 players, like, are you going to have everybody leave their gun on the field and like okay with other players using it? Most people aren't that. So you'd have to have. Like
Theft would certainly be an issue, yeah.
To do it, you have to do, to do those type of games, you need to have like a huge sponsor to just donate all of the products being used.
Yeah. And
even still, like, that's just a huge undertaking, like how you would do it. It's a cool idea. I'm not saying it couldn't be done. It could be done.
Yeah.
And it could be fun. It comes down to a whole bunch of things, of honesty a little bit, making sure that people are, that's a game that is like more important for people to be honest, than other regular Airsoft games.
Yeah.
Like, because it's it's individual based, so like it really has to be super honest to the point where if you're not honest in like a two-team kind of thing, like one player is not really going to make a huge difference. Yeah. Eventually they'll get shot enough to call out or what have you. But like when you're going on these huge 1v1s, especially if like money is involved or anything like that, like I'm referencing like the Mr. Beast thing.
Yeah.
Like who knows really what's going to happen. So
yeah, I was going to say like that's probably the biggest hurdle to overcome is if you've got 100 players on the field, there's even less incentive to be honest, because it's kind of every man for himself. And if you go down, there's nobody else out there to help you or to accomplish the objective. And so people are just going to be like, no, I'm going to lone wolf this, and no one's going to hit me. I'm going to be the coolest dude ever, and that just doesn't work.
Or they won't move, they won't take risks, they won't have fun. And on top of that, like even if you throw out like, say there's no reward for winning, right? No reward at all for winning. Imagine you're like the guy who dies first or second, and then let's say this is like a regular day at a field. You just waiting forever for the next game, and you maybe like didn't even get to shoot a gun. Like that player, those first 10 players who get knocked out before they even find a gun.
Yeah, and then they're sitting.
And they're not having fun. Like I just don't. I think it would be cool if you did like a stage thing where you have like people invited to participate and it's huge, a huge Airsoft influencer game or something like that. Like that would be super cool, and maybe it would be a really good content. That said, I don't think it would work very well for a public game.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
No, you got a point. All right, well, we're going to round out this episode with one last question.
Let's do it.
And once again, before we read this last question, if we didn't get to your question this episode, repost it from the last episode in the comments section of this episode. We'll cut it up, throw it in our helms of reasoning, and we will get to it next episode. If you guys have any, comments on anything that we've answered, a varying opinion on whether or why you might think that 100 players might be a great battle royale, or how you think we can get more female airsoft players into the game, or maybe why you think American and European airsoft players are different or games are different. Any of those thoughts, comments, questions, throw them in the comments section below. Our last question of this episode comes from Uno Airsoft.
Uno.
Yes.
Why did that?
Okay, you ready for this? This is a doozy.
Am I ready for this?
This is a doozy. Yeah. We're going to have to keep
Cue the music.
We're going to have to keep our opinions very, very politically correct. You ready?
Okay.
Okay. Best and worst knockoff airsoft tactical product.
Oh, good. All right, this is good.
Best and worst. Okay, so let's each do a best, and then let's each do one worst. And we're each gonna pick one, because otherwise we'll do an entire hour on this.
Okay.
Okay. Obviously, there are tons of excellent knockoffs and tons of awful knockoffs, but let's try to limit it to one each. What do you think?
Let's try to figure out what this truck is doing. If it's pulling in.
I think the best airsoft knockoff are the Bravo Avengers M300 lights.
That's a good
M300,
answer.
M600. I think for a knockoff and for their price, they are every bit as effective as you need them to be in airsoft. They've got pressure switch that fit common pressure switch mounting options. They've got the ability to mount to existing mounts for existing real flashlights. And the fact that they're affordable, not overpowered in terms of like, you know, it's airsoft. You don't need, well, I mean, we also all use 1,000 lumen lights now, but for the average airsofter, I think a $50 purchase of a 150, 300 lumen light is more than enough. I think they're robust enough. And they're CR123 powered. I think that is probably the best knockoff, and they look legit in photos.
Yeah.
If you're into,
that's a really good
photo
answer.
stuff.
I mean, actually, that reminded me of another knockoff item, but I'm not going to talk about that one. I'm actually going to talk about. Well, actually, you know what? I have three. I have three items now.
You're supposed to choose one. Okay, fine.
I have three items. I'm
Okay.
not. I'm going to glance over. I'm going to glance over the first one,
Okay.
which is the mock PEC 15s, especially the higher end ones are actually pretty decent, and they can actually function pretty well.
Right.
There were the old GMP lasers,
Which we
that were
can't
also
get
really
anymore.
good,
Right.
But we'll not talk about those too long. The Rasputin stuff, which I don't know if is really around much anymore. I don't know if that, I haven't really seen a lot of it in stock.
Yeah.
But that stuff was pretty good. But I'm going to go with the Emerson Blue Label Cry knockoffs. And their quality's pretty good. They sometimes, I'm going to say this, they sometimes use real fabric. They sometimes don't.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But they're probably like durable enough to be able to be used, and they're pretty nice if you were looking for something that's not as expensive as Cry G3s or G4s.
And that brings up an interesting point too. Like they're kind of knockoffs, but they're not really, right? Because they're kind of made in conjunction with Cry, aren't they?
I don't know about those.
I
mean,
wasn't sure.
I don't really know. I don't know what's happening with the Cry license in regards to the Airsoft license and where everything's at.
I see.
Like I can't specifically say anything about them.
Yeah.
That's for people
Yeah,
above us to decide and figure out. I don't really know.
Got it.
But I would say, like, if I would really like to be able to plug the Rasputin stuff more, but it's just you don't see it anymore, really.
Right.
But anyway, that's
so
the
best knockoffs. All right. How about a worst?
Well, you go first.
Okay. So there was a company who shall not be named that was making knockoff revision stuff, which is hilarious because revision is kind of like a second version. Some of their goggles are like second versions of like flakjacks, for example.
And their non-turbo fans are actually not that expensive.
So revision is already like an affordable brand that work really well, and they've got excellent anti-fog wipes. But there was a company that was making knockoff versions of revision goggles that were literally breaking and getting in people's eyes and shattering and failing. And the idea that calling something ANSI rated or appropriate for airsoft and then potentially having players go blind because of it makes the top of my worst airsoft knockoffs of all time. It's literally the most important thing in airsoft is protecting your eyeballs.
Yeah.
I remember, and that company should be ashamed.
There's some overseas gear companies. I don't really know the specific OEMs because you just never know who the OEM actually is. But they're from like, you could buy them from EB Airsoft or whatever.
Sure.
Those other sites, and like you maybe get it, you maybe don't. Like it was back in those days.
That's true.
Where you didn't really know if you're gonna get it or not. But you're like, oh, it's so cheap. Like I remember getting some of those things, and you're just like, wow. Like they just fall apart like as you're like you know, you take it out of the bag and like you pull the pouch open, it just like rips in half.
Yeah, that's true.
You're just like, what? But yeah, probably some of those old chest rigs that were similar to some of the Condor stuff at the time, like the old MCR3 or something like that.
Oh, with the stitching that was so bad.
It was basically, I remember I bought one and it like fell apart.
Yeah.
Right when I was just like, really? So I had to like sew it up to reinforce it. And I used it for a little while because it was cheap, but some of you got to avoid those.
Yeah.
The gear that sometimes, I mean, it's not as much of a problem anymore. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, sure.
It used to be like anybody who says it's like really a thing right now, it's not as bad as it used to be. It used to be a free for all.
Yeah. I remember we used to buy vests from like Jungle Toy back in the day where like the PALS webbing wasn't like appropriately spaced, and so your pouches wouldn't fit.
I remember seeing some stuff like that.
Like your rows would be off, and then or like the stitching between bays would be off.
Yeah.
And so your whatever that stem is called for the back of PALS webbing, like it'd go through and like kink between rows. Dude, it was like, what the hell? So I'm glad we don't really deal with that anymore. But yeah, there's nothing worse than like cheap, super cheap knockoff gear that doesn't take standardized pouches. There's a reason the PALS and Molly threading system is a standardized system, because pouches will fit between different platforms made by different manufacturers. And there's really nothing worse than buying a vest that doesn't fit.
It's really
pouches.
not that hard to just make sure everything's aligned, it's properly spaced. Even if you don't have the machinery to do like the automatic whole row or whatever like some companies have. Like, it's not. That's a really good question. Now I'm trying to think of anything else. Like, there's been some helmets that have been really bad.
Yeah.
That looks like that looks like the fast helmets or the OpsCore helmets. And
for the money.
There's been some that are really bad though. Like they're like too small. They won't even fit most adults.
Oh, true.
And, stuff like that. Trying to think. There's probably been some other ones that we're just not naming. I'm actually curious what people's other experiences are.
That's an excellent question.
I think our good ones are good. Our bad ones are kind of mediocre. I'm sure there's worse stuff out there.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Yeah. Anyway, to end this video on a high note, if you have any ideas of what the best airsoft knockoffs or the worst airsoft knockoffs are, go ahead and put those in the comment section. We want to hear from you guys what experiences you've had. Have you ever bought something that you expected to be poor quality and were surprised by how well it performed or how long it lasted? Or did you spend some money on something that you really expected to turn out well, only to find out that EOTech that you ordered from DHgate turned out to be rose gold instead of desert tan? Anyway, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Not So Round Table. If you have any questions, one more reminder, put them in the Helm of Reasoning by entering them in the comments section. And
see you next month.
We'll see you next month.
Valentine's Day special. Oh wait, no, this is Valentine's Day special.
Well, I was 14.
Yeah, whatever.
For those of you that have a Valentine's Day, happy Valentine's Day.